Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest edition of our Cult Classic documentaries, where we look back at iconic TV shows and movies that left their mark in terms of time that are still being talked about today. This week, we go back into the vault. We go back as far as 2008, and a high-octane sort of where cars meet prison in terms of the sort of team. And it's all about the cult classic movie that was Death Race. And I'm delighted now to be joined by one of the stars of the film, Fred Koehler, who played the role of Liz. Fred, first of all, 2008, a long time ago now. Does it almost feel such a long time ago? Or can you still back and see memories or date back to that sort of time? Is it fresh in the mind?
It feels like it was yesterday in a lot of ways. Obviously, it wasn't, but we had such a great time filming it. And I think because there have been some subsequent sequels that I've worked on, the character and kind of the world of Death Race has stayed with me throughout. So no, I don't have too much trouble recalling it.
And I suppose, Fred, it was shot in Quebec, Canada, most of the sort of show and the movie, and then obviously it was other parts were in California as well. What do you remember of the shot in terms of location? Were you mainly in Quebec, Canada, or did you shoot some of the scenes in California as well?
I was primarily in Montreal, right outside. The set for Terminal Island was one of the coolest sets that I've ever been a part of. It was actually an old train depot and factory where they made train cars that had been in disuse for probably well over a decade. So it was this enormous geographical set with all of these different buildings, and they basically built the prison in the interior of that. It was fascinating how they did it.
And I suppose, Fred, in terms of how did the opportunity get around for you to get cast as the character lists in Death Race? Did you have to go through a rigorous audition process?
It was 2 auditions, if I remember it correctly. There was an initial one, and then there was a second one with Paul Anderson.
Okay. And in terms of Paul Anderson, a writer, director, what was his sort of vision of the character sort of list? He comes across like a quiet, kind of conserved character that's found himself in a place, an environment that he just doesn't seem to belong to.
Paul was extraordinarily insightful and helpful on 2 separate occasions. Like I said, the second audition, the callback I had with Paul. And when I was in the room with him, I had done kind of what I did in the first audition, and he wanted to do a second go through, and he said, listen, I know the character is kind of written as he has a lisp, not a lisp, a stutter, but I want you to think about it less as a physical impediment and more that there is just a synapse in Liszt's brain that can't quite connect all the time. So there's this kind of herky-jerky shifting of gears in his brain as he talks. And he gave me that little bit of information and that insight before the second time through, and it changed everything for me. And the second thing that he did was actually when we were on set, months after that audition, after I had already gotten the part, once we were actually in production. And I remember I didn't know, although I had kind of like my own ideas as to why and how Liszt ended up in prison. But there was nothing in the original script that gave me that information. And very casually in conversation, it came up. And Paul looked at me and he goes, I think he killed his mother, and walked away. And that changed the world for me, for him. It really opened up these doors and avenues that I could kind of go down and really kind of think about who and what this guy was.
Yeah. And I suppose, Fred, the movie, when it came out, as we said, there was a budget of 45 million. It grossed 76 million worldwide. So it almost doubled in terms of profit, in terms of the gross, in terms of the budget. But it was a budget, dare I say, reading that over 250,000 was spent on each car to sort of get them up to the sort of specifications that were needed for Death Race. And 35 cars were used in total. So no stone was left unturned in terms of the making of Death Race, in terms of the details that went into the cars. And obviously those cars, 85 mechanics were working on the set as well, constantly repairing these cars for action.
No, one of the things that was really awe-inspiring when I arrived to set finally in Montreal was the cars. They had doubles and triples of various cars. I think the hero car, the Frankenstein car, they must have had maybe 5 of them. And they were all very specifically, and each car was specifically engineered to do different things. Some were faster than others. Some were more heavily armored to be picture cars. Some were less drivable. Some were more drivable. They were so detailed. They were so specific that they were characters unto themselves. The guys who ran those cars and took care of those cars had an immense job in front of them and did splendidly with it.
And Fred, were you sort of blown away in terms of the stunts team that was working in Death Race and being able to see the stunts firsthand?
The one of the really illuminating things were most of my stuff was shot in the pits with Ian McShane and Jacob Vargas. And there were kind of 2 types of days. There were the days where the camera was just on us, and obviously we didn't have the cars to look at, but we would have somebody with a stick and a tennis ball on the top run by to follow our eye lines and this sort of thing. So we were reacting to kind of nothing and using our imagination. And then there were the days where the cars would actually peel through. And one of the first days of that was when the giant dreadnought truck comes through, firing its guns. And I want to say it was the first day that we incorporated the cars into what we were doing, simply because we were so naive about the power that those vehicles had when they roared through. There was this sense of, oh, I'm going to creep up to the edge and kind of get as close to this as possible and watch this because this is a thrill. When that thing turned the corner and barreled down and the guns go off, your natural fight or flight instincts kick in and you just kind of edge back and edge back and edge back and just want to turn and go. The sheer power that they have, the roar of the engine, the speed of them, they were just powerhouses.
And one thing that struck me, Fred, in terms of the research of the movie was the conditioning that Jason Statham did in terms of to try and get himself in preparation for the movie. Partly he lost half his sort of body weight as well in terms of the stunts and the effects to get himself ready for Death Race. Did you saw speaking to Jason in terms of the shooting of the movie, in terms of the dedication, did you see really that he was paying an awful lot into it to make it such a success?
Oh, those guys worked hard, Jason especially. They had training, I think, every other day, if not every day. I was lucky I could sit and eat a sandwich and have a Coca-Cola. I was not required to work out, which was great for me. But no, Jason had a trainer. He was on a very specific diet. He was lean and mean. And it was a part of the day. Watching the discipline and the fortitude that he had throughout, 14, 15-hour days to incorporate working out and eating healthy and doing all of the things that he needed to maintain that physique was impressive.
And Fred, in terms of working closely beside Ian McShane, what was that like for you?
Oh, it was a thrill. I mean, for me, Ian was somebody to look to just as an actor, and getting a chance to meet him and sit at his knee for 3 months was just, he's a wonderful storyteller. And Jacob Vargas, who plays Gunnar, we would spend the vast majority of our days together as a team. So when we were off camera, Ian was just holding court. He's lovely, he's smart, he's witty, he's a gem of a human being, gem of an actor, gem of a human being.
And was there any sort of pre-screening of the movie for all the cast? Did you get to see it up close for the first time? And what was your sort of general reaction? Had you a sort of an idea in terms of how good it probably would be in terms of your imagination, or were you still blown away when you saw it for the first time?
I was blown away for the first time. The first time I saw it was in a public movie theater with a real audience. I think that they had some kind of a screening, if memory serves, at Comic-Con that year. I was not there. So for me, I went in blind. I am not one of those actors who watches dailies or playback. So I went in knowing nothing and was thrilled by it, blown away by it. For me, the film shares a certain DNA to a lot of the action movies that I grew up loving. Something like The Running Man, something like Escape from New York. It has that kind of dystopian viscera that as a boy I really liked. And for me, it just fit right into that kind of pulpy, culty action movie that they don't make so much anymore. It's there's a grittiness to Death Race that I really loved.
And Fred, in terms of your character, it almost felt like he was institutionalized in terms of being there so sort of long. It was like he couldn't cope outside his surroundings of the prison sort of walls. And that came out to fruition towards the end of the movie.
Yeah, I think Liz is a really interesting character. Like I said earlier, when Paul had told me that he was in for matricide, that he indeed killed his mother, that changed a lot of things for me. And I think that one of the things that has always kind of stayed with me about that character is I don't think he would nearly survive as well outside of prison, outside of Terminal Island, as he does in the little niche that he managed to find himself in prison. Now, I think he needs to be a part of the team in order to do that, to stay protected, to stay safe. But I think within that little bubble that he created for himself, he's his best self in a way. So yeah, I don't think that the notion of escaping, the notion of leaving prison is something that he would be too amped up for.
And Fred, the general reaction of Death Race when it came out sort of worldwide, was it sort of a busy time for you in terms of opportunities, in terms of media opportunities? Did you almost feel a bounce in your career straight away after in the subcoming sort of months and being involved in Death Race and being involved in a project with Ian McShane and Jason Statham? Was it sort of a busy, hectic time for you around the movie and obviously afterwards as well?
I don't remember it being particularly impacted by that. You know, my career has been pretty steady, and that's something that I'm really proud of. It's not a lot of highs, not too many lows, and I think that it was kind of just on to the next and on to the next. I mean, Death Race was a really wonderful project for me because I did 3 sequels, and I think Robin Shue, who plays 14K, and I did 2 other films together, and then I did a third, and I think the third one was the only one that I think I'm the only member of the original cast that was in the third film. So Death Race has been this like gift that keeps on giving. It's been wonderful. It's taken me to Africa twice. It's taken me to Bulgaria, Montreal, as we said. It's this this wonderful part that I'm in, this world that I'm able to revisit from time to time.
And I suppose, Fred, when someone mentions a cult classic movie to you, what sort of resonates? Is it sort of a niche movie that lives on with a particular fan base throughout generations, or is it one of those movies that people remember of a specific year and it sort of lives on in terms of when people look back and say, oh, what came out in 2008? And people say, oh, Death Race came out in 2008. It's after 10 or 15 years, people are still talking about that sort of movie. What for you sort of resonates? Why do you think people consider maybe Death Race in terms of a cult classic? Because maybe did it set the boundaries for future genres of that types of movies?
I think to answer your question, I think it's probably more the former than the latter. I think that it certainly is one of those films that it surprises me when somebody mentions it, to be honest, because it was a while ago, and yet there is a certain amount of glee when I walk into a supermarket or into a 7-Eleven or a coffee shop, and somebody will kind of approach and just look at me and be like, Death Race, I love that movie. I think that despite its popularity, I do think that it is, I don't want to say a niche, because I don't know that action at this point falls into a niche. I think that Jason obviously has a huge fan base. Ian has a great fan base of people who watch him. Natalie Martinez does. Jason, I mean, the cast of that film really was great. So all of the people who enjoy those individual actors' works, I think, have come into it. And it's kind of a hodgepodge of people that way. But I think that truthfully, it's just a really fun romp of a film. It's super violent, and there are moments of fun and funny. It's wonderfully shot. It's really gritty, and it's kind of got everything for everyone in a way. I think you can be a 14-year-old boy. I think you can be, a long-time action aficionado. You can be somebody who likes dystopian science fiction-y kind of films. I think it offers a lot, and I think that makes it a cult classic. So it's one of those films that just about anybody can find something in that they really like.
And I suppose, Fred, lastly, before I let you leave, in terms of Death Race, have you any sort of fond memories or particular sort of story that's unique to yourself from your time on cast shooting or location that people aren't aware of that you might like to share in the audience? Maybe a particular interaction or conversation with a particular character, or some sort of funny sort of take in between a sort of scene that still makes you laugh to this day?
Two things, neither of which are really specific, so forgive me for that. But
yeah.
The experience for me was the participation in working with Ian and Jacob and Natalie Martinez and Jason as that pit crew. It really did create this really wonderful kind of team aspect that whether we were in a scene and we were trying to make things work, and actors would be giving other actors their lines in order to keep the rhythm going in a way that worked better, or Paul coming in last minute and giving us a suggestion and then us adapting to that. There was a real sense of ensemble, which in filmmaking is not necessarily something that you achieve usually. And the other thing was that it was like watching a ballet of violence. And for me, that was a thrill because I got to be an audience member most of the time. There's only one little section where I get to kind of come in and interact during a fight scene where I help Jensen get out of it by stabbing with a pen the guy who's attacking him. But for the most part, I really got to be a fly on the wall and watch stunt people and watch Jason just do these amazing ballets of violence, which, it being really the first action film I've ever been on, or was at the time, I think it was a great way to kind of enter that world. Those guys are experts at what they do. They're fantastic.
On that note, Fred Koehler, a pleasure talking to you today to relive your memories of your time on Death Race, our special feature of this week in terms of cult classic movies. Death Race, which came out in 2008, Fred played the character List, an iconic sort of character, and obviously he went on to sort of greater sort of stories, appearing in all three of the future Death Race movies. Fred, a founding sort of member, he was there from day one. He was there till the bitter end, as the saying goes. Fred Koehler, a pleasure talking to you, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavours. And thanks for taking the time out of a busy schedule to speak to us here about Death Race.
Thanks for the chat. It was fun.
Cheers. Take care, Fred.
Bye-bye.